Hello, I'm Christophe Cognard, professor of neuroradiology in Toulouse, south of France. I present you Laurent Spelle, that everybody knows, professor of neuroradiology in Paris, Kremlin-Bicêtre. We'll discuss today two studies, one concerning the use of web in ruptured aneurysm and one concerning the use of EuFRED. So we'll start with the study, CLARYS study. Can you tell us a bit about the method, the purpose of the study?
CLARYS is a study which was designed to study the efficiency of the web device, to protect from an early rebleeding in ruptured aneurysm. As you know, the web has been extensively evaluated on the safety and the efficiency through the 3 European studies and also through the US study, WebIT. It has been proven to be safe and efficient. But the major issue is, as you know, the web is supposed to provide a delayed thrombosis of an aneurysm. So up to now, all the aneurysm, the majority of the aneurysms that were treated were non-ruptured aneurysm. The major question that we had is whether or not the web was able to prevent from an early rebleeding. What is an early rebleeding? It's a bleeding that is occurring within the months after the initial treatment of the ruptured aneurysm. This is the only purpose of the CLARYS study is to really evaluate the efficiency of the web to prevent from an early rebleeding within the population of ruptured aneurysms.
Okay, so what was the methodology that was used in CLARYS study?
It's a methodology that is widely used, especially in all the studies were conducted by microvention, meaning that you have to follow the good clinical practices, meaning that you have an external core lab to assess the result of the imaging modalities, and the clinical event they have to be evaluated by an external CA, was in this situation Laurent, the core lab being James Byrne in the UK. And the third parameter for the GCP study is having all the data being monitored by an external company, external to a microvention company.
Okay, I think it's very important to have the independent evaluation of both the clinical result and the angiographic.
And it's also important to notice that within the protocol, when the center was starting to enroll patients with ruptured aneurysm being treated with web, we were double checking that all the aneurysms that were treated were integrated within the CLARYS trial, okay, to avoid to lose one of them. So it was carefully checked for that.
So it was a consecutive study.
Consecutive enrollment, which is a completely different song as a retrospective study or a single center with retrospective assessment.
So finally, what are the main results of the study?
So before giving the result, we spend a lot of time when designing the protocol to be very sure that the patient didn't bleed again before the treatment, because you know you have some time before the bleeding and the treatment. This is why all the patients, they got a CT in the angio room, meaning that if you had a CT after the procedure, meaning that if you had the bleeding afterwards, it was due to a lack of prevention of the rebleeding from the web. So all the complications that could happen were all recorded, and it's incredible, but we have none of the patients that has rebleed. The rate of rebleeding is 0% among the 60 patients being enrolled.
And so that's the main point, and those aneurysms treated with the web, they don't rebleed, and we were concerned, both of us, by the fact that you don't fill the aneurysm with coils. You place the web, there is a stagnation of the contrast, and we were wondering whether this will be enough to avoid to prevent the re-rupture. But then what was the rate of complication due to the use of the web in this situation?
So once again, the rate of complication was secondary endpoint. Really, we wanted to be sure that the web was effective to prevent of a rebleeding. So the safety of the web during the procedure and at 1 month was a secondary endpoint, and it has proven again to be safe because we had several complications during the treatment, only one of them having clinical consequences due to the web. But if you look at the result at 1 month, the MRS, the modified ranking score, you had 1.5% of mortality at 1 month, and the patient who died was a death due to the vasospasm. And we had also some morbidity, 15%, which is quite high, but I remind you that it's a population with a severe disease. All the patients, they are admitted in the ICU, and the 15% of the complications are due to the disease, to vasospasm, or to hydrocephalus. None of them are due to the use of the web.
And so finally, the percentage of complication of morbidity, which is related to the device itself?
We have no complication at 1 month due to the web.
Okay.
We had one perioperative complication that has led to a clinical consequence, which was not anymore existing at 1 month.
So no permanent complication.
Exactly.
So very good result. So finally, the result of this study and the fact that now we have web that fit in a 17 catheter, so softer web in a smaller catheter, will it change your way to treat ruptured aneurysm?
Yeah, you point out something which is important because I didn't specify. Within the CLARYS study, the web 21 was used. So nowadays, for 1 year, something like that, we have the web 17, which is a kind of revolution because you can treat aneurysm deploying a web through the same catheter as the one we are using to treat aneurysm with coils. So it makes the treatment really easier. You know that it's not anymore a concern. The web can fit within a 17 microcatheter up to the size of 7 millimeter. So it's very important to assess the efficiency of the web and its safety. So this is why we'll be conducted the Web 17 study, which name is CLEVER, and we'll have 2 arms, an arm for the ruptured aneurysm and an arm for the non-ruptured aneurysm, and we'll get the answer for that.
Okay, it's very good to know that this new device is very well evaluated since the beginning, and there is still continuous evaluation with the new evolution of the new device. So thank you very much, Laurent. It was a pleasure discussing with you.
My pleasure, Christophe. Thank you.
Now I would like to present you Markus Möhlenbruch from Heidelberg, and we are going to discuss together the result of the EuFRED study. So Markus, can you tell us a bit more about the purpose of the study?
Thank you, Christophe. So the purpose of the study was to have large cohorts, since before only small retrospective case series with less than 50 patients were published. And that's why we conducted a retrospective post-market registry with a consecutive patient enrollment. And the reason for this was, of course, to show safety and efficacy of the EuFRED.
What was the methodology of the study?
It's actually a prospective enrollment in the study, but the data analysis was performed retrospective. So all the participating centers had to confirm that they enroll at least 5 consecutive patients.
So what are the main results of the study?
So the main result of the study was that if you look on the safety profile, that and this was our surprise, of course, that the morbidity rate was very low. It was 0.8, and the mortality rate was 1.5. So it's a very low morbidity mortality rate if you compare it to other studies, for example, to the big meta-analysis which was performed several years ago and published in Stroke. There they had a morbidity rate of 5% and a mortality rate of 4%. But the good thing is, of course, that there is another interesting trial, a multi-center prospective GCP trial from France called the SAFE trial. And here the safety data is published, and they had very similar rates than our study. So here they had a morbidity rate of 2% and a mortality rate of 1%. So it's very similar. And if you, for example, compare it to other flow diverters like the pipeline, here we have different studies, of course. But one is a pooled analysis of the PUFS trial, IntraPET, and of the Aspire trial. Again, here the morbidity rate is a little bit higher, and the mortality rate as well. It's 5.7 and 3.3. And of course, this was our surprise. But again, the nice thing is that the data is confirmed by the GCP trial from France.
The results in terms of morbid mortality are extremely good. But in terms of angiographic occlusion of the aneurysmal sac, was it good as well?
Yeah, so if you look on the overall occlusion rate, it was 69%, but we had a lot of patients with short follow-ups. So if you look only on the patients with a longer follow-up than 3 months, and here we have a data set of more than 500 cases, then we have a follow-up rate of 82% after 6 months, and with a longer follow-up than 1 year, we have an occlusion rate of more than 95%, which is pretty good.
Okay, and concerning the location of the aneurysm in this series, was it the same that in other previous series concerning flow diverter, mainly ICA aneurysm, or?
Yeah, no, it's of course the most common location in this study cohort was the ICA, but we had a lot of aneurysms which were located more distal at the ICA or MCA, so more than 11% of the aneurysms were bifurcation aneurysms, and we had aneurysms from the posterior circulation included as well. But if you look, for example, on the size of the aneurysms, so most of the aneurysms were smaller than 10 millimeter in diameter, but on the other hand, we had more than 23% of the aneurysms were larger than 10 to large or giant aneurysms, actually. Yeah.
So finally, if we look at the result in terms of morbid mortality, which are very good, in terms of angiographic occlusion, which are very good as well, and the fact that those devices were used in many different locations, do you think that the result of the study will change the use of the EuFRED and the indication of it?
Well, I mean, I think we have 2 different points. So one is that we now know, again with the EuFRED study and with the GCP trial, that the safety profile is really, really good. And this gives us the possibility to enlarge our indications. So I think definitely we can use the EuFRED not only in the ICA, we have the possibility to use it in the MCA or in the ACA. Of course, here we have to look, because I think we have different complication profile. So I think, for example, that the rate of complications in the MCA bifurcation aneurysm is different to an aneurysm which is located on the pericallosal artery, which is, of course, a bifurcation aneurysm. And I think that, for example, a pericallosal aneurysm is a really good indication for flow diversion, but still flow diversion in distal located aneurysms should be not the first line treatment. So there are other good options like web, like coiling, but if there is not a good option for these kind of treatments, then we know now that flow diversion could be a good option. But you have to keep in mind that, especially in bifurcation aneurysms, the occlusion rate is probably a little bit lower compared to side wall aneurysms, and it takes longer to get a complete occlusion. So it's better to look after 1 year instead of looking after 6 months. And this is, of course, what you have to say to the patient.
So I think it's a very interesting study, and probably the indication of the FRED in unruptured aneurysm will increase a lot, and that will address many other locations. So thank you very much for this fantastic work, and it was a pleasure to discuss with you about it today.
Thank you,
Markus.
Christophe.